Run, river, run, run through the hills. Run, river, run to the sea. Run, river, run to your place beneath the sun. Run, river, run over me.
Hi, this is Jan Lewis. Welcome to be my guest. Today we have Marlboro person. We have April Middleton, and she is an author of the book I Am Not Crazy. We'll take a look at this. I love and accept myself the way I am. What made you decide to write that?
For me, I've always been inspired with writing. I've been writing since I was a child.
You started then?
Yes. And I started with like short stories, poetry, and pretty much anything I could get my hands on. I love to read and I love to write.
Yeah.
And when writing, I found that you can kind of capture yourself in whatever story you created. You could become anything, you could get lost in anything,
Yeah.
and it really is therapeutic in a sense just to be able to streamline your thoughts.
Did you, by the time you get to high school, did your teachers realize that you had that talent?
Yes, they did.
They knew.
They
knew.
did.
And then, did you go to college after, or did you continue writing?
Yep, I did go to college
Where'd you go?
after. So I went to Mass Bay first,
Yeah.
got my associates in the psychology, sociology,
Yeah.
anthropology track.
Yeah.
And then from there, I went to Framingham State,
Yeah.
and I got my bachelor's in psychology from there. After that, I continued on again,
Wow.
and I went to William James College. Well, it used to be Massachusetts School of Professional Psychology, now known as William James,
Yeah.
and I got my master's in counseling there with a concentration in couples and family.
You were a busy girl.
So very, very
Oh
busy
my
girl.
gosh. So now you are a licensed, in the right back of her book, a licensed mental health counselor, and you talked about how you got your degrees.
Mhm.
You specialize in trauma treatment.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
It's very hard work, I find, but it's very rewarding. And one of the things that I've encountered with being a counselor for so long is that many people that come through the door have a history or an experience with trauma. And it really doesn't matter how big or how small someone else might deem it to be. It really just matters how much it impacts the person. And I've realized with all of the work, whether someone came in for a substance use issue, whether it was court-ordered or DCF, or someone else told them to come in and get treatment for themselves or their family, a lot of them had that experience.
They did. And I know that you have a passion for serving the underserved community.
Yeah.
Did you have that growing up where you knew you could tell all around you that people needed more help than they were getting?
Yes.
You saw it.
And I think for myself growing up in the Framingham area, I saw it all around me that a lot of people, especially those, we'll say from maybe minority populations or other cultures, are more reluctant to get help. So a lot of times there's that untreated mental health conditions. You see that a lot. And for me, I've always had a knack for speaking to people. I was always kind of that one person that everyone would go to.
Yeah,
and
I can
kinda
see
tell.
why. You have a very calm, direct way about you. Oh, definitely.
Yes.
I can see. Now, do you work full-time in this position?
I work
Are you in
full-time.
Framingham or Marlboro?
In
Where?
Marlboro.
You're in Marlboro.
Yeah.
Isn't there a place there called the Ark
Yes,
for
there is.
people in recovery
Yes,
to go
there
to?
is.
I've heard a lot about that.
Yes, and they service a lot of people in that community, as well as others that have transportation. They can travel. They provide a lot of services, outings. You can get involved. You can volunteer. There's educational opportunities and groups and stuff there as well.
Well, I know Spectrum Health is over in Westboro. Yeah,
Mhm.
they're not too far from Marlboro.
No.
We just had on one of the directors over there. Now, tell us about the book, I Am Not Crazy, and what made you decide to write it.
Okay, so I Am Not Crazy. It chronicles kind of you're reading the memoirs or the journal of a girl, Ariel Washington, and you kind of dive right into a point where Ariel has experienced a mental breaking of sorts. And this has come by way of years of trauma and dealing with a lot of abuse and never being treated. So when it comes to the point of you meeting Ariel in this story, she's almost very broken, if you will. But there's this resilient part to her. She's also inspired by the love for her own daughter, which forces her to look at things differently. As you see Ariel in the beginning, you realize she has a lot of issues with her family of origin and a lot of things that have happened to her where she internalized, like many victims of trauma, it's kind of that shame and that guilt piece that comes in.
And she's been hospitalized too.
And she's been hospitalized too, and that experience in and of itself is horrific for someone who's never encountered mental health or even knows what these things mean.
She goes, what do you do when you think your life is falling apart and you think you're crazy and no one cares but you? You save yourself and only then can you save the world. At the hospital, September 5th, 06 to September 11th, 06, 6 days, 5 nights. I know that those overnight places for the kids, it can scare the you-know-what out of them. And I don't know how, now, as I was reading along, she's keeping track of all the different days. It starts in 06, okay, and it keeps going. Without giving it away too much, tell us how it keeps going.
So in the beginning, you see Ariel. She's going through a difficult time. Ariel is a young mother in and of herself, so she had to make some pretty tough decisions to put herself in treatment as well as see to the care of her young daughter while she's gone. But in finding care for herself, she had to ultimately give up her daughter temporarily so as not to send her back into the home that she had just fled from due to all of the years of trauma and abuse that she encountered. So as Ariel's in the hospital and recovering, her main focus is really to get back to her daughter. So we see her starting from in the hospital program, so she's on an inpatient unit, you see that. And she's going through those days of adjusting to life there, going through groups, medication adjustments, and just learning how to put her mind back together again. And a lot of time with trauma victims, like you see with Ariel, there's that mental fragmentation that occurs.
Like almost like a psychosis.
Yes.
You know, I don't think there's, is it the insurance companies? What is it? That they don't let the kids stay in there, or anybody, stay in there long enough. Do you think that's true?
I think it's, part of it is by medical necessity, right? So they keep you in for as long as they deem necessary. Some may need more, some may need less, but a lot of times you are held down. You're beholden to the system, and what insurance will cover is how long that the person will be able to stay. And even if, say, they needed more but it wasn't authorized, they would have to work on transitioning them out in the best way possible.
And that's the hard part, when somebody leaves, the transition. Well, where are they going back to?
Yes.
You must see this a lot.
Yes, we definitely do. And I think working in the field and providing therapy, you see that sometimes the decision that has to be made is the least of all evil. It may not be what's 100% best, but it's what would make sense, what's possible, how can you plan around it, what is safe for the person, but at the same time, what is something that won't hurt them or derail their recovery in that way.
I think a lot of the kids are afraid that, well, I don't want to talk against my father or my mother, but that might be the abuser. And they're afraid that they're going to get hurt, or they're going to, maybe they love the parent. I've heard about this. They can have a unusual loyalty to the one that abuses them. What is that all about? And
that's that dissociative piece, that mental fragmentation there, right? So they learn to love this person, but at the same time, the brain itself has to separate to protect them from the trauma. So part there, you see that separation between their self, that self-conscious self, and that subconscious self. And here you see them almost like protecting themselves. Well, I have to associate love with this person because they provide my basic needs.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it conflicts with my inner self.
Sure.
Because my inner self feels the need to protect myself from that person. So you have that dual, kind of like that dichotomy there where I love you, but you've really hurt me. And how do I reconcile that within myself?
And they block it.
And they block it.
Some don't even find out years later. It's still, you could ask,
Yes.
but they'll say nothing happened, nothing
Mhm.
happened, and you know, you're thinking like, I know one case, it's like, I know something's up, something's strange here, because, you know, and you're thinking, well, if it didn't, it didn't. Sometimes you've probably seen a lot of misdiagnoses. A child with
Mhm.
ADHD,
Mhm.
let's say they morph into the new one, bipolar, and then they keep morphing.
Mhm.
You must see this a lot. When the time they get to you,
There's a lot, by the time they come, there's a lot of diagnosis on the table. And I try to err on the side of caution before putting another label and really look to kind of rule out what I think it might be. Also taking into consideration their past diagnosis. But a lot of what we've seen, especially with the younger minds, is that for some, that trauma may look like ADHD.
yeah,
It may look like an oppositional defiant. It may look like something else
Yeah.
because that is them reacting to the things that have happened to them. And for children, they don't have that higher order thinking, that executive functioning. They're still developing in that way. So they can't articulate as well as we can, but their behaviors in their bodies show us that something's wrong.
well, yeah, and I know as a parent, you know, the say the kindergarten teacher calls you in for a conference, and they sit you down and they say, child has ADHD, I think. And I think a lot of parents think, you're crazy. My child's just enthusiastic. And then it morphs into conduct disorder and this and
Mhm.
that. And it is like almost like a train, a freight train that's heading for disaster.
Mhm.
What made you want to write this? I Am Not Crazy. What really experiences you've had?
Yeah. I think for myself, what made me want to write it is my own experiences, also hearing stories from others. After doing this so long, there's certain things that you tend to hear the same story almost over and over, and it's heartbreaking. And around the time that I was writing this book, we had just had the recent suicides of Anthony Bourdain and Kate Spade.
Yes.
And they were within about 3 days apart.
I know.
And it kind of jarred me. This was back in the summertime. And I just kept thinking, why is it that people feel like it's not okay to say I'm okay?
Yeah.
What is it that's holding individuals back from actually getting help if they need it, or even recognizing that something's wrong? Why are they feeling like I have no one that I can turn to? And you see a lot of celebrities and other individuals. You see athletes, you see rock stars, you see
Robin Williams.
movie stars. Robin Williams, case in point, and people think, well, they have it all, you
Yeah.
know. What kind of problems do they have? But that also shows you that a lot of people aren't comfortable saying, I need help, you know.
April, how can they reach you to get your book?
To get my book, you can get it from Amazon. It's also on Barnes & Nobles. It's on Bocas Books and other online platforms, Zulon Press as well. So all you pretty much have to do is look up my name and I Am Not Crazy, and the book will pop up. You can also request it to be sent to your local bookstore or the place of your choosing and have them sent it there if you'd like to get it then. If you'd like it at your local library, you can just request them to have the book sent so you can use it that way as well. It's also available on the Kindle and the e-reader formats for those that maybe have a tough time sitting and reading the book. You can have the book read to you as well.
Also, at the dedicated authors hall here at Upton Library, you can find a copy of I Am Not Crazy. And this, you mentioned something, you drew upon some experiences that you had had.
Mm-hmm.
That had to have been really rough.
Yes.
Yeah, you went through some hard times.
And I think for me, one of the things that I can relate to, even just with the people I work with, is we've all been through something. I know for myself, coming from a background of you really didn't ever get help for anything, no matter how big or small it was.
Right.
You kind of learn to keep things on the inside, keep things inside the home, and you were never able to acknowledge, well, some of these things just don't feel right to me.
Yeah. You trust what your feeling is. It doesn't feel right. It feels icky, this type of thing. Did you design the cover?
I did.
Did you draw it?
Yes, so that what the cover came about as, and it was a self-portrait that I did back in high school.
I wondered if it was you.
It was one of mine.
Back in high school.
I won a Boston Globe, the Gold Key, for this piece of art right here. And it was one that I figured, just by looking at it, I wanted to put this on the cover because of just the way the character looked at you. The way the eyes kind of held so many things there, and that it was something that could be relatable to others, and that when you look in the eyes, you see there's something that's behind that piece.
She looks a combination of fearful and sad.
Mm-hmm.
There's a definite thing there. You are also bilingual, English and Spanish.
English and Spanish
So you
proficient.
can. So this is great. You can, with a lot of Spanish community, when they come in for help, they can. So. You arts, a Master of Arts in Psychology with a concentration in couples and family therapy. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. I don't know which is harder, working with the kids or the couples. What do you think?
It's equally. I think it's equally hard.
Equal.
They're just kind of different. With the younger individuals, again, they can't do a lot of the intuitive work, so it's more integrative, collaborative play, getting them to open up in non-traditional ways, whereas with an adult you can have a conversation. Now, the only problem with adults is sometimes as we get older, we're set in our ways, we have our patterns and our routines, we have our thought processes and our worldview, the way we see things.
Right.
So for them, a lot of times it's harder to change these patterns because either they're not aware or they're not willing to accept because it does challenge their reality. So there's that cognitive dissonance there. And that's kind of where the work comes in when working with couples or adults, co-parenting or whatever the case may be.
Dealing with denial.
The
Elephant in the living room.
Yes.
What I'm just going to say.
Yes.
You are a mandated reporter,
Mhm.
okay, which means simply...
that if someone were to come in and express that there were any sort of abuse of any nature or them hurting themselves or another person hurting a child in any way, I would be mandated to report that.
Right. Do you let them know that, or you just...
Yes, no, they find out at the beginning. That's
Yeah.
part of the informed consent process. And we also, what I try to do throughout is kind of to keep that there so that they know throughout the process. It's a continuous informed consent.
Definitely.
You know, if things come up that I'm questioning, like, we might need to explore this a little bit more. But I'm very upfront with my families, and if I ever do need to report, they would know about it. It wouldn't be a surprise
That's
to
good.
them.
That's good. We're talking with April Middleton. She is the author of I Am Not Crazy. I Love and Accept Myself the Way I Am. Do I see another book on the horizon?
Yes, book number 2
Oh.
is starting in the works. I'm starting to write kind of some of that.
Yeah.
I'm looking at next year because I want to just give this one time to
Sure.
marinate with the people and let them get familiar with the story.
Mhm.
But there will be a follow-up to
There
the
will
book.
be a follow-up. How long did it take you to write this one?
Honestly, to physically type it, it took me about 2 to 3 weeks to type
Weeks?
it up.
That's
That's to type,
Yeah.
but
Wow.
but to actually write it, it took a while, like a few years to write.
What's your family think of it?
I guess depending on who it is, some might be in favor, others might not. The
Mhm.
content is really sensitive, so for some it might be triggering for them in their
Yeah.
own experiences, but overall the reception has been really good.
Really, really good. Now, you've been to Tatna.
Yes.
How was your reception there?
It was wonderful.
Did you have a lot of people in the room?
Yes, we had a good turnout. I wasn't expecting as much as that came, but we pretty much filled the room, and I had about 20 or so people there.
Great.
That just kind of showed up for it, and it was a pleasant surprise.
That's wonderful. Now, where else have you been?
Greater Framingham Community Church, so
Yeah.
I talked about it there. Probably go back and do a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then just starting to spread out and
Yeah.
kind of...
This is great. There's so many different things. Authors expos.
Mhm.
I deal with authors all the time, and I was telling her one of the places I send them is definitely one of the first things is Tatna. There's another great place up in Webster, very famous little bookstore. getting out there is more than half the battle. It really, really is, because you got to get it so that people know. But there's so many families who can relate to what you're writing in here, as well as the young young adults.
Yes, definitely.
You see a lot of millennial kids in there, their 20s.
I do. I see young adults. I see younger children as well, and adults. But I know for the young adult population, right, that transition age between about 16 to 24, a lot of them are in that space where they kind of don't feel fully accepted by the adult community, but they don't kind of relate to the younger children and what their needs are. So they're in this like funky gray area in the middle. And a lot of the work with them is really finding themselves, developing their own inner core, right? Their own ego at that point, learning to listen to their own voice,
Right.
but at the same time working to respect whatever values, traditions, or the cultural pieces that come in, right? Because some of them, if they're from different cultures,
Right.
what they go home to, regardless of the work that I'm trying to do with them, will look very different. So keeping that in mind, I'm not going to tell someone, say, from a traditional family, maybe a Latino family, to go in and let your father or your mother have it. For me, that wouldn't be respecting kind of their culture. And similarly, I wouldn't send someone into, say, a minority African American home and have them go toe-to-toe with, say, someone that's victimized them.
Right.
It's just learning how to navigate these things, starting to have discussions, becoming more comfortable, even talking about what mental illness is and kind of what it looks like. And for me, a lot of the work is finding that comfort zone with my clients for what will work for them, because what might work for one won't work for all, regardless of their background.
April amazes me. She has that. You have a very quiet, calming, straightforward way about you, and I can see where you would be awesome with not just the kids, but with us adults.
Yeah, the adults.
Do you find that people are over medicated? What do you think about that?
I think that's something that we're definitely start to look at now, especially in the professional field, and also working directly with the providers and the practitioners and the psychiatrists to advocate for clients and also communicate with them so we can see, is there a way we can make an adjustment, and if sometimes the trick is finding the balance, because say for example a client has schizophrenia, and they may need a certain medication, but they may feel like, oh, this is too much, I feel lethargic, I don't feel like a person. But then you also know that without this medication,
They're gonna go off.
they might go off the deep end. So it's that balance between, okay, let's work with your provider and see if there's an adjustment that can be made. But
Yeah.
at the same time acknowledging, the pros and cons. I know you want to come off, but what's something that might happen as a consequence, and really kind of working through some of that with them.
Yeah, I have a friend whose wife just refuses to go and get help and to get I can see, I'm not a professional, but I can see there are medications that might help her feel calmer, and then she could
Function a little bit better.
Yeah,
be more
exactly. But it's
comfortable.
what it's doing? It's killing him.
Mhm.
The whole, it's a family disease, right? And it's pulling
Yes.
him right down, and their son, and he's beside himself. He's basically a caretaker, but he isn't. He's the husband, but she won't let him guide her to maybe some counseling.
Yes.
And it's not a stigma, these days. Come on, it's just like going to the dentist office. You could sit there and see a neighbor walk in. Really, it's not a big deal as much as it was when our grandparents and parents were.
Yes.
That back then, it was like,
Yes.
oh, no.
I think it's definitely become more visible,
Yeah.
more accessible, and less stigmatized, but you still deal with that, again, with individuals when we go back to Robin Williams and Kate Spade and those of the like, not wanting to say, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
And it's not so much of not wanting to say, I have a mental health condition. It's not wanting to acknowledge, I'm not perfect. I can't pull myself up by the bootstraps with regards to whatever this situation is. And almost like going against what intuitive you feel like that need to protect yourself and not look like you can't handle things.
Yeah, and I love your title, I Am Not Crazy, and I accept myself. I am not crazy. A lot of kids will say, well, I don't want to go in there, we're adults, because they're going to think I'm nuts.
Yes.
No. You know, where did I hear it? Years ago, was it a doctor or somebody said, if you think you're crazy, you're not.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? If you're aware of what
Yes.
you're thinking, you're not crazy.
Yes.
You know? You find that?
Yes, and I think if more individuals kind of learn to trust themselves and really trust that voice on the inside, their intuition, they would know that a lot of what they experience is that automatic body response, that fight or flight that kicks in. And even when you don't understand it, your body is working to protect you.
Yeah.
Whether that's blocking something out, disassociation, taking a step out of yourself to kind of live through a horrific experience, or even something minor. A lot of people don't realize how strong the mind is, and it has a way of protecting you even from yourself.
And I just learned recently so much of a connection between the mind and the stomach.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because a doctor, if you're having stomach problems, could give you an antidepressant. You're like, why are you giving me that for my stomach ache? He said, you watch. It will help. It will help. I don't know, because it seems to balance the thing out like that. We've got to close, but again, April, how can they get your hold of your book and reach you?
Yeah. So they can get a hold of me, april.middleton1@gmail.com. For the book, it's available via most online platforms, even some that aren't local to the United States. I did find it on Vocus Books and other platforms, but Amazon, Barnes & Nobles. You can request it at your local bookstore or wherever books are sold and ask them to send copies there if you'd like to do that. You can request it at your local library and have it sent there. So it's available online, Zulon Press, Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, and it's a really good read for a lot of people.
Also, you know, April, if somebody would like to contact you because they have a loved one or themselves would like counseling, are you available to give out your contact?
Yeah, so they can contact me, and that would be at april.middleton1@gmail. You can also reach me at 508-388-4186 and contact me directly for a consult or see if there's any services that may need to be provided.
And you're right over in Marlborough.
Yeah.
Do you ever go into the homes of the people that you help?
Some, but not too many.
Right.
So a lot of it would be office-based
It'll be
work.
in the office.
Yeah, it would be.
I think that's good. And they can call and ask for you specifically.
Yes, they can ask
Okay,
for me
April
directly.
Middleton. How about that? Now, any relation to Pippa Middleton over in Britain?
No, but every time I Google my name, they always pop up with the Kate and the Pippa,
Oh,
especially
my.
with the weddings.
Oh, God.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for being with us, April. And also, if you take a look downstairs in the Upton Library, look for I Am Not Crazy. And thanks so much for being with us. And let me know when your next one is done.
Yes,
We'll get you back on.
definitely.
We'll see you next time on Be My Guest.
Thank